This video was requested by one of my subscribers. If you have any suggestions for topics, themes, or cases, let me know in the comment section below. In 2003, an old Boeing 727 was being stripped and refitted at 4 de Fevereiro Airport in Angola. After the work was done, the plan was to sell the aircraft to the highest bidder. However, this would never happen. On May 25th, 2 staff members who were involved in the refurbishment process were caught on camera sneaking into the airplane. Neither of these men were qualified to fly such a large plane, but these men weren't worried about that. Just before sunset, the aircraft began taxiing onto the runway without communicating with the control tower. It entered the runway without permission, and air traffic controllers desperately tried to contact the vessel. There was no response, and the plane took flight, heading southwest over the Atlantic Ocean. The plane contained 14,000 gallons of fuel, which would give it approximately 1,500 miles worth of flight time. At some point, the aircraft requested permission to land in the Seychelles Islands, which are more than 3,200 miles away from the airport. The plane was given permission to do so, but it never landed in the islands. The aircraft never landed in any other country either, and it was never heard from again. One of the perpetrators was a 50-year-old man named Ben Padilla, who was an American pilot and flight engineer from Florida. He had 2 children and a fiancée back home, and his family stated that he had loved planes ever since he was little. His certification was only valid for small aircraft, and he had been hired by Aerospace Sales and Leasing to oversee the mechanic work on the plane. According to his co-workers, there was nothing unusual about him or his behavior. He did everything he was supposed to during the refurbishment process, and there were no indications that he wanted to steal the plane. The other perpetrator was a mechanic named John Mutatu, who was originally from the Republic of the Congo. The FBI attempted to look into John's background during the investigation, but hardly any information is known about him. The initial theory on the airplane robbery was that it was an act of terrorism. Remember, this event took place in 2003, just 2 years after 9/11, so the FBI and CIA speculated that the plane might be used as a bomb. However, this theory eventually died out due to the plane's disappearance. Another theory is that they stole the aircraft as part of an insurance scam. The plane had been sitting idly at the airport, racking up fees and not being used. It's possible that the perpetrators stole it so that an insurance claim could be filed and paid out to the company. In fact, the CEO of Aerospace Sales and Leasing, Maury Joseph, had a history of falsifying financial statements and declaring bankruptcy with previous companies. Some people speculated that he may have paid Ben and John to steal the plane for him. The FBI looked into this possibility and eventually cleared his name. The final theory is that the plane crashed somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, but no evidence of this has ever been found. It also doesn't address the motivation behind the theft, which I personally think is fascinating. Such a large-scale theft surely had a compelling reason, but nobody knows for certain. A few months after the plane's disappearance, a Boeing 727 that matched its description was spotted in New Guinea. This sparked rumors that it was the missing plane, but the authorities were never able to confirm this. The US State Department dismissed the theory after investigating. To this day, the plane remains missing and nobody knows what happened or why. On April 13th of 1978, a spiritual organization called the Sant Nirankari Mission hosted a convention at the same time as the Sikh festival of Vaisakhi in India. The practices of this organization were considered heresy by Orthodox Sikhism, and a procession of around 200 Sikhs marched to the convention. The procession was led by a man named Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, who was vehemently opposed to the Sant Nirankari Mission. The convention ended up descending into violence, with 2 of Bhindranwale's supporters and 11 members of the mission being killed. Following this, a criminal case was filed against 62 Nirankari supporters for the murder of 13 Sikhs, but the accused were acquitted on the basis of self-defense. Some Orthodox Sikhs claim that this was part of a conspiracy to defame their religion, and Bhindranwale's rhetoric continued to grow more vehement and extreme. The Akal Takht, a seat of religious authority in Sikhism, issued a letter of authority to ostracize supporters of the mission. All of these events snowballed into even more violence between Orthodox Sikhs and Nirankaris. Talwinder Singh Parmar was a Sikh extremist living in Canada at the time of these events. Sometime in 1984, Parmar visited a car mechanic and electrician named Inderjeet Singh Rayat in British Columbia. He asked Rayat to construct a bomb, and according to Rayat, Parmar did not reveal the target of the bombing. Rayat proceeded to ask various members of the local community about dynamite, claiming that he wanted to remove tree stumps on his property, and he also discussed explosives with a co-worker. During this time, Parmar was traveling across Canada with a preacher named Ajaib Singh Bagri, inciting fellow Sikhs against the Indian government. In August of 1984, a criminal named Jerry Boudreau claimed that Parmar had shown him a suitcase with $200,000 inside, promising to pay him the cash in exchange for planting a bomb on a plane. Boudreau decided to take this information to the authorities rather than go through with the bombing. In September of that same year, a criminal named Harmail Singh Ruel told the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police about a plot to bomb a flight out of Montreal. Ruel's report was dismissed as unreliable. On March 5th of 1985, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service got a court order to place Parmar under surveillance for 12 months. The order was justified by the fact that Parmar's associates had claimed responsibility for various assassinations and attacks across Canada. In April of that year, an unnamed Canadian who was familiar with explosive devices was asked about dynamite by Rayat. Rayat also allegedly offered to pay numerous people in the community triple the normal price for dynamite, and he also let slip that he needed the explosives because of, quote-unquote, trouble in the old country. On May 8th, Rayat purchased a digital automobile clock at a Radio Shack in Duncan, British Columbia. He then returned to the same store a week later to purchase an electrical relay, and he asked the employee at the store how to get the buzzer signal from an automobile clock to power another device. In the span of 1 month, wiretappers recorded a total of 9 phone calls between Rayat and Parmar, so the Canadian government subsequently added Rayat to a list of monitored persons. Rayat proceeded to visit a television repair shop, where he asked for help with a partially disassembled car clock that was wired to a lantern battery. He told the store employee that he needed the buzzer to stay on, rather than intermittently beeping, in order to turn on a light in his camper to wake him up. The employee knew that Rayat did not own a camper, so the request was highly suspicious. By the middle of May, Rayat was going into the woods near his home to test a device he had created. This device contained a 12-volt battery, cardboard cylinder, gunpowder, and dynamite. The device failed, and Rayat proceeded to purchase multiple sticks of dynamite from a well driller in British Columbia. He bought several blasting caps a few days later. On May 31st, he brought his timer and a boombox to his mechanic shop so that his coworker could fix it, but he ended up returning the boombox after it failed to work. On June 4th, agents with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service followed Parmar and a man they described as youthful from Parmar's house to Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal in Vancouver. The men took the ferry to visit Rayat at his home and later his mechanic shop. After this, Parmar, Rayat, and the unidentified man were seen taking an object into a deserted forest area. The agents heard a loud bang which sounded like a gunshot, but they did not see anything. The next day, Rayat purchased a large component tuner, which is essentially a device that receives and decodes radio signals. He also purchased smokeless gunpowder from a sporting goods store. On June 9th, a police informant reported that Parmar visited a Sikh temple in Vancouver, where he warned the congregation that it would be unsafe to fly Air India. Another informant for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police was recording a Sikh drug deal that same month when he accidentally ended up recording a discussion about a plot to bomb a plane. He provided the recording to the authorities along with a transcript of the meeting. However, no action was taken. On June 2nd of 1985, a man calling himself Manjeet Singh called to confirm his reservations on Air India flights 181 and 182. He was informed that he had been waitlisted and the airline offered him an alternative flight, which he declined. At 8:50 a.m. that day, Manjeet checked into a line of people who were waiting for a flight from Vancouver to Toronto. He asked an agent to check his suitcase and have it transferred to Air India Flight 181, then to Air India Flight 182. The agent initially refused to do so, telling Manjit that his ticket was not yet confirmed, but when Manjit started to walk away, she gave in and accepted his suitcase. The suitcase made its way onto Canadian Pacific Airlines Flight 60, which departed from Vancouver without Manjit. Flight 60 arrived in Toronto at 4:22 p.m., where the suitcase was transferred to Air India Flight 181. That same day, by pure coincidence, the X-ray scanner at the Toronto airport broke down, and security were instructed to use a portable explosive sniffer. The device made a loud screaming noise when it came close to explosives. When agents used the device on Manjit's suitcase, it made a quiet noise. The agents had not been taught what to do if the device made a quiet noise, only when it screamed loudly, so they let the suitcase through security onto the plane. At 8:15 p.m., Air India Flight 181 departed from Toronto. The plane arrived in Montreal at 9 p.m., where it became Flight 182. It then departed for London Heathrow Airport, which was its last stop before reaching India. The plane was flying over Ireland at 8:14 a.m. Irish time when it exploded. The bomb had been hidden inside the Sanyo tuner that Rayat had purchased, which was placed in Manjit's suitcase. The plane was at 31,000 feet when the explosion caused it to break apart. The wreckage fell into deep waters off the southwest coast of Ireland. In total, there had been 329 people aboard the flight, 307 passengers with 22 crew members. By 9:15, a cargo ship discovered the wreckage of the plane, along with countless bodies floating in the water. Every single person on the flight had died. 132 bodies were recovered, but the rest were lost at sea. The investigation revealed countless pieces of evidence that the disaster had been caused by an explosion. On April 29th of 1986, Inderjeet Singh Rayat pled guilty to possession of an explosive substance and possession of an unregistered firearm. He received a $2,000 fine. Believing that he had gotten away with his atrocity, Rayat moved to the UK with his family. However, fragments from the bomb were recovered and examined by experts who determined that they had all been purchased by Rayat. He was arrested on February 5th of 1988 while driving to work, and he was extradited to Vancouver. He was convicted on 2 counts of manslaughter and 4 explosives charges. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. On June 6th of 2001, Rayat was about to finish his 10-year sentence when the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrested him once again. He pled guilty to 1 count of manslaughter for aiding in the construction of a bomb, and he was sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison. The court alleged that, although Rayat had constructed the bomb, he was ignorant of its purpose. He was released on parole in January of 2016. There is a lot more information about this case, including the context behind the bombing and the aftermath. If you want to read about it some more, you can check out the Wikipedia article I linked in the description. Click the join button to become a member today. Channel members receive exclusive content as well as early access to all my content. On March 16th of 1962, a Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation propliner was transporting 96 military passengers from California to Vietnam. The military passengers were going to Vietnam to relieve American troops who were training Viet Cong guerrilla fighters. The aircraft departed from Travis Air Force Base and was en route to Tan Son Nhut International Airport in Saigon. There were 4 planned refueling stops: Hawaii, Wake Island Airfield, Guam, and the Philippines. The plane arrived in Guam at 11:14 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on March 15th. They refueled and departed Guam at 12:57 a.m. with an estimated arrival time in the Philippines at 9:16 a.m. The aircraft was carrying 9 hours worth of fuel. At 4:22 a.m., the captain radioed a routine message to give his position at 280 nautical miles west of Guam. At 5:39 a.m., the Guam radio operator attempted to contact the captain for another position report, but the captain did not respond. The aircraft and its crew were never seen again. The Clark Field Rescue Coordinating Center declared the plane missing later that morning. U.S. Navy officials believed that the plane had crashed closer to Guam than the Philippines, but the circumstances were very strange. At the time of the plane's disappearance, the weather had been clear and the ocean was calm. The Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Marines all ordered both aircraft and ships to search the area between Guam and the Philippines. After a total of 8 days, the search had covered 200,000 square miles of ocean, but nothing was ever found. The effort was called off. Flight 739 was the second flight with military connections at that time that was presumably destroyed, which led airline officials and the media to speculate that the flight had been sabotaged. Flying Tiger Lines released a statement saying that this was a possibility, but at the end of the day it was merely a wild guess. However, some people believe this was the case. On the morning of the plane's disappearance, a Liberian tanker vessel reported seeing a bright light in the sky near the plane's expected position roughly 500 miles west of Guam. The light was bright enough to light up the ship's deck. Immediately after this, the ship also witnessed 2 red lights with vapor trails falling to the ocean. The tanker attempted to locate the objects they had seen, but they were unable to find anything. Officials with the Flying Tiger Line stated that the aircraft did not contain anything that was strong enough to blow the plane apart, and something violent must have occurred for this to be possible. Based on the observations of the tanker crew, the Civil Aeronautics Board concluded that the plane had most likely exploded midair and the wreckage fell into the ocean, but this theory has never actually been confirmed. There is also no known cause for such an explosion. The disappearance of Flight 739 will probably remain a mystery forever.